there was I beat Hawk the Road Warrior in a tournament to see who would wrestle Ric Flair. So he really gave me a shot in the arm, and as far as being in the business.
As far as wrestling Ric Flair, how was your experience with Ric Flair in the ring and behind the scenes?
Oh, always professional. I always had good matches with him. He uh, he knew that I could work, and he was always about you know eh, rather than just going out there and beating somebody. He made his opponents, and that way he actually beat somebody when he did catch a fall on him. So always. And last time I saw Rick, he was very cordial. He came over to me. I didn't go to him, and so you know, Flair's Flair.
Did you ever get the chance to go out with him on any of his wild nights?
I was in a few towns with him back in the kayfabe days. Everybody tried to stay away from each other, but we always ended up in the same place. But yeah, he was buying drinks for everybody.
They were jumped by bikers. I guess fan attacks were a common thing back then. As a baby face, you probably weren't attacked that much. But what would have been one of the worst fan attacks you witnessed?
Um, I don't know. A lot of times, unless you were out there when it happened, you really weren't a witness to it. But I can recall, and an attack's an attack, I guess. But we were in Roanoke one night, and somebody yelled that Kevin Sullivan had been stabbed, and we went out there, and there was a lady with a scout knife taped on the end of an umbrella, and she had uh, poked him with it. I thought that was kind of funny, but it's never funny when that goes to that point where the fans are trying to harm the wrestlers and stuff. But um, you know, I've never really witnessed a whole bunch of things when it happened unless it was on video.
As far as working for Mid South Wrestling, how did you like working for Bill Watts overall?
I learned more about the business and respect for the business than I did anywhere at that point in my career. Um, I've told the story many times. I missed a plane from Shreveport to Tulsa, and I got to the show in time, but I wasn't there an hour before, and so he fined me $50 for being late, and then he asked Grizzly Smith, who was a matchmaker, if I was late all the time, and he said no, he's usually the first one here. So he told me I brought him a receipt where I bought an alarm clock, and he gave me my $50 back, which I did, and that alarm clock is still in my old wrestling bag today, and that was in '85, I think it was, so, or '84. Yeah, he taught me a lot. Of course, I made Ernie Ladd. Buck Robley was booking the first time I went. When I went back the second time, Ernie Ladd was, and Ernie and I got to be good friends, and sat under the learning tree, as he called it. But it was I drove Ernie some, and just to get his knowledge, and but yeah, I learned more there, and respect for the business there than I had previously where I'd been.
You worked with Arn Anderson when he was just starting out in Bill Watts as well. How was that experience, and could you see that he was going to go on to become a star at that point?
Yeah, he was a natural. When I first went down there, the Dirty White Boy Tony Anthony and I went together, and we shared an apartment, which was he was a heel and I was a babyface, which was a no, but nobody said anything because we kept it hush hush, and nobody really knew. And then he teamed up and went with Lynn Denton as one of the grapplers, and then Arn had been coming down for TV, and then he got a job. They wanted him to stay, so I moved him right in with me, and we had underneath matches a lot of the places, and Arn had all the tools, and he knew all the holes, and it's like a puzzle. And I tell guys today, it's a puzzle. You just got to learn how to put it together. And so I kind of gave him some storylines, and he practically telling the same story every night. You just got to tell it different. And so he caught on pretty quick, and then he got right up under Ted DiBiase, and it was just he was just a natural.
You ended up in WWE. How did you end up getting your WWE matches? You won a lot on house shows, not so much on TV, but you had a good little run there, it seemed.
Uh, in '89, actually, Demolition had called, Bill or Barry won, and said they were looking for a young tag team to come up there, and so Brad wanted Brad and I to come up there, and then Brad didn't want to travel, so I actually went by myself without a spot or position, just just to go up there and work. And Chief Strongbow was an agent, and so he would keep me or let me work dark matches prior to the shows. Uh, he he said I was too good a talent just to be cannon fodder. Uh, so I got to do a lot of tryouts with guys when they would come to try out, and then I would get in the cable matches, or he would put me in a tag match and beat the other guy. Just try to protect me out of professional courtesy. I thought was to me. So, but Brad and I didn't go. Thus, the Rockers went. So, uh,
So you think if you and Brad went as the Lightning Express, you probably would have had a push at that point.
yeah, I think that was where they were pushing it to. But again, Brad didn't want to go, and so I went up there without a spot. So, and the Rockers
How
went,
was
and the
working?
rest is history.
How was working with the Macho Man?
Um, I like the Macho Man. He, I had a match with him in one of the last matches in the Boston Gardens, and that's when Sherry was with him. And he came up to me and he said, "Timmy, they want me over with elbow. Set it up." And I said, "Okay." So he asked if I wanted to. No, I asked him. I said, "You want to use Sherry in this?" And he said, "Yeah, let's put a little heat on her." So I just laid a match out, and I said, "Let's just swap holds, and you get some heat, and either come back, sidestep me, throw me out, draw the ref, Sherry posts me, rolls me in, you drop elbow off the top. He said, perfect. So that's what we did, and went back. And Vince told him, he said, good match, good setup. And he said, I didn't do it, the kid did it. So he was always nice to me. I didn't have any problems at all with him.
You also wrestled Bret Hart in the WWE. How was that?
Uh, Brett was good. Um, I guess one of the matches I had with Brett, um, I was trying to get fired, for lack of better words, uh, and I was with Brett on the afternoon show, and I just told him, they came and asked me to pee in a pee test, and I told him no, because I was trying to get out of a contract, and so Brett said to finish up where um, I went to, or he went to leap. I went to leapfrog him and nutted myself and just took a count out. That was Brett's finish, just to, because he knew, I was just trying to get out and be as business as I could with it. So, but yeah,
What was your contract for? Like, was it just a year, or was it something like 3 years?
no, it was just a 1 year well, it was a 1 year contract, or maybe it was 3 years. I don't recall. But anyway, it gave them the right to book me 7 times for $150 per night, and pretty much it was just a, back then there really weren't any contracts, just contracts to tie you up, and so that contract just said, and it said the territory was the world on it. So I sued WWF at the time, and actually won that lawsuit because I filed in
What
Tennessee.
was the lawsuit over?
I just wanted out of my contract. I just wanted out of the contract because I wanted to go back to WCW at that time. They had switched personnel in the office, and they were signing up guys, 150 grand a year. Brad Pillman, Z-Man, a lot of guys, and I'd gotten word they said, come back here. They could use you down here. So I just wanted to get out of it because they weren't doing anything with me up there. So went to the
And
Gardens.
I guess the pay would vary depending on how big the arena was.
Well, Vince told me in the Gardens, when I went to the Gardens and they asked me to put Lombardi over, and I said no. Then they said, Vince wants you in his office, and he told me he didn't like me stirring shit up in his in his dressing rooms. And I said, look, I'm just trying to make a living. And he told me I was going to make X amount of money, and I said, yeah, but 85 grand a year is not a lot when you're 265 days on the road with a hotel and food and gas and rental car and all that. I said, I was better off just staying at home working at McDonald's. So anyway, he suspended me for 2 weeks, but I never went back. So
How was
suit.
wrestling Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig there?
Oh, it was awesome. Awesome. Yeah, he was so good, and he liked working with me. He liked working with Brad. He said, man, he said, I wish we could do this every night. And I said, yeah, so do I. But yeah, he was awesome.
Now, as far as starting up Smoky Mountain Wrestling, I understand um, you were going to start your own promotion. Supposedly, you had an investor for $40,000 or something like that, but you ended up. Could you clarify the stories about? I guess you were part of the ownership at one point, or how did the whole thing come about?
Well, there was that's all hogwash. I had ran some shows, and I had done some bought shows, did some fairs and some other things. So there was never an investor. I don't. know where that came from. Well, I know where it came from, but it wasn't true. I was just running some shows, some independent shows on my own when Sandy Scott called me and asked me if I'd be interested, and I said, "Well, I'll sit down and talk." And then we talked, and uh, you know, one thing led to another, and Smoky Mountain Wrestling was born.
Did you have any involvement of bringing Rick Rubin, the money backer, in?
I did not have any doing that. Now, looking back, I see a lot of signs that I wished I'd have saw earlier, but I didn't. Um, Jim Cornette said that he and Sandy were going to fly out to meet with Ruben, and I said, "Well, what about me?" And he said, "Well, I hated to ask him for another ticket." I said, "I got 600,000 Delta miles. I'll fly myself and go out." So I went out with him um, to this meeting, and that should have been my first inclination, but it never crossed my mind. I just thought he was trying to save money and get a backer.
Were you friends with Jim Cornette, I guess, before all that, through the NWA to lead to your partnership for SNW?
We'd never had any beefs or anything. I mean, we'd worked with Midnight Express a lot of times, but there was no issues. No.
What was the whole beef over?
Well, there's a lot of stuff, and I'm not going to get into it because a book is coming forward, and I don't want to spill a lot of beans, but it was just it was one thing to I guess to have a business than running a business. You can know a lot about a business, but if it's not run properly, then it just there were some incidents where he wrote some checks to some of my friends who were doing our printing, and I said, you got to pay these guys, and he said, well, just screw them, we'll go somewhere else, and that just to me wasn't good business. I live in this town, and these were my friends I wrestled in high school with, and they were doing us a favor, and so, and that, from my understanding, continued even after I left.
So was your main job promoting the town that you lived in? Because I heard you had the merchandising duties at one point too.
Yeah, I was doing merchandising. I owned a screen printing company, and the merchandising did well. I mean, we were selling the videos and everything, and we just he wanted to do things different sometimes, and I didn't agree with it, and we had this ring truck that we went to the bank, and we were renting trucks, and it just got crazy because we were having to unload the truck, load it back up, 3 days, unload it, load it back up, store it. So we decided to buy a truck, went to the bank, and of course Smoky Mountain didn't have any credit because we were a new company. And he told Jim he could put it in his name, and he said no, and he said, you put it in Sandy's name, and Sandy said he didn't want it in his name. So it ended up in my name because I was the only one at the bank could get credit. So that's where it was. So the ring truck was in my name, the insurance was in my name. So I had the whole liability of that truck and whoever was driving it. And then it blew an engine. We fixed the engine, and then I left, and then they were still using the truck, and it blew another engine, and they left the truck sitting at the garage. The garage called me and said that they there's a $400 storage fee on it, and the engine was blown, and what they wanted to do. And I called Sandy and I said, "What are y'all going to do?" And Sandy said, "Well, let me call Jim." So he called Jim, and then he said, "You do you want word for word?" And I said, "Whatever." And he, you know, GD, FS, and hope it burns up. Just leave it setting. So Sandy told me, he said, "Sell it, go get it and sell it and get what he owes you." And because he had held me back on some checks, and so because Sandy had already told me, and so did Brian Hildebrand, that he was going to try to get me to quit. So I knew what was coming down the pike, and I'd already left at that point. But anyway, so to keep my credit, because they were going to turn it over to collections, I went and paid $400 to get the truck out. Had it hauled, paid $185 hauled to my place, and it sat there for 6 or 7 months, and then I finally decided to fix it, and I put a new engine in it, new struts, new brakes, new tires on the front, and ended up selling it to Goodwill, and still lost money. So that's the deal with the truck that everybody says that I stole, which I didn't. So
I think
and
he said you stole a fax machine too, but he had bought it for you, I believe, right?
no, he it's another Jim Cornette lie. He and Sandy bought fax machines, and I would go over at Jim's every day or every week and get the cards and take the cards to the printers to for the shows coming up the next month. So anyway, Jim's up all night. He doesn't wake up till 2 in the afternoon. Well, heck, most people's days done at 2 or 3. And so he says, "Why don't you get a fax machine? And I can just fax you this over here, and you won't have to come by here." And I said, "Well, I can do that." So I bought a fax machine out of merchandise, and that's the fax machine. It was his idea to buy the fax machine, and I even told him he could come and get it, but he didn't want to do that. So that's the story on the fax machine.
Now, I know you wrestled Bruiser Bedlam, who was in Smoky Mountain Wrestling in WWE. He
Yeah.
and he, you used him in Smoky Mountain. He's quite a controversial character. Do you have any stories about him?
Um, I really don't. He came in, and he was just cordial to me, and we got along. I saw him at the gym a couple times, and nothing. You know, I knew he had a past, but it never came up. So I didn't I didn't really have any issues with him.
For WCW, were you under like a yearly contract when you worked with them?
I was on a per night, per event deal with him.
How was your experience overall working for WCW?
Um, I wasn't there that long. Well, when Ole went in, and I went in as when I came back from WWE, I went there, and I went in as Ole had asked me to come in, and so I pitched the Star Blazer um, angle with him, where I was under a mask, because I was when I was in WWE, one of the agents suggested maybe putting a mask on and with Owen Hart, because he was Blue Blazer, and so I came up with Star Blazer, and of course, a lot of times if it's not their idea, then they're not going to go with it. So I don't know how far that agent pushed it or wanted to or anything, but I just had that in the back of my mind. So that's when I pitched it to Ole, and Ole said, "Well, let's see what it is." And this is this was this was Star Blazer. So um, anyway, uh, it lasted through one of the pay-per-views. I think I worked with Mike Rotundo on a pay-per-view, um, but I don't know if it got in the book and switch or whatever happened down there. But it just kind of fell by the wayside. So that was the extent of Star Blazer.
How did you end up becoming a WWE producer?
Um, Johnny Ace had called me. I had Johnny Ace's first match with him, and Mark Laurinaitis, his brother, some of his matches, and then the Road Warriors Animals too, some of their first matches. So I just called him up, and then he called me back and asked me if they were going to hire some agents. Would I be interested? And I said yes. So I went up there, and Ted DiBiase and I were doing the ECW at the time, and then that went away. I guess it ran its cycle, and so I guess they didn't need us anymore. So he and I both left.
Who were some of the guys you liked working with best when you were there as a producer?
Um, I was there when the cheerleading squad was there. So with doing the stuff with Hunter and Sean and all those guys, and that was a good time to be there working, because they were young guys, and they would listen at that point. A lot of guys today don't want to listen, but those were some of the good matches that I enjoyed working with up there.
I think at one point ECW were doing their own house shows. Why didn't that last very long? Was that just attendance issues for WWE's ECW? I mean,
Yeah, it was. It never drew, especially in the South. It was big where it was, but it never drew well in the South. We went to Baton Rouge and Louisiana and some towns down there, and then some towns in Alabama and some Georgia towns, and it just never picked up. I don't think a lot of people watched it and knew about it until it got on to mainstream with WWE, but it just never caught on in the South. Now it was big. It drew where it was, so Philadelphia and up there. So
it never caught on, Hannibal. You never caught on, Hannibal. That's why you're doing interviews now. You couldn't hack it where it counted. So you've taken too much of my client's time. White Lightning, this is Mr. White Lightning to you, Mr. Captain to you, and I'm glad I can't see your face, because it's been a happy new year so far, and that would have ruined it. See you later.
go to hell.